and live. Yo, what up, Knicks Nation? What is going on? I know we're all still feeling ecstatic about yesterday's Game 1 win against the Boston Celtics. 0-10 against who? Don't matter, man. It doesn't matter about the regular season. All that matters is the postseason. And we got to get it right. We got to get correct for Game 2, okay? We're still in the Beantown. Well, at least I live here. And we got Noah Dalzell, who covers the Boston Celtics for Celtics CLNS and Celtics blog. She does a great job doing so. Make sure to give her a follow on all socials. Make sure to hit that thumbs up button for the squad today. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. We're going to get into the weeds of Game 2. But first, we got to go through Game 1. So for Knicks fans, I know you're excited. For Celtics fans, who I know are all tapping in here, you all like to hide in the comment section. You all like to be braggadocious once you all win. You can all enjoy this one too. So let's get into this, all right? And make sure to support our sponsors, Underdog Fantasy. Use that promo code KFTV to get up to $1,000 in instant bonus cash and a free pick. Noah, how you feeling? How you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. Thank you so much for joining the show. Appreciate you coming through as always, so that we could break this thing down. And let's just hop right into it, okay? Let's talk about Game 1. Let's recap. I know we're talking a little bit behind the scenes. You're still fresh. Everyone's talking about Game 1, especially from a Celtics perspective. Let's break it all down. What did you see yesterday from Game 1? Did anything shock you from the Knicks perspective? Let's go there.
So first and foremost, I'll say I had the Celtics winning the series in 5, but I thought that every game was going to be a battle. And I know Celtics in 5 sounds like, oh, you think the Knicks are a joke. I actually think the Knicks are a great team and have a ton of respect for a lot of the players on that side because of what they've accomplished, their playoff experience, their college basketball experience, and all that. So I didn't expect the Celtics to blow a 20-point lead, but I don't think you can be that shocked anymore when you see that in the NBA. I mean, we all just saw the Cavs-Pacers game and how a 17-point lead, evaporates, and how a 7-point lead with less than a minute to go evaporates. Like, it's just kind of the part of the game. I will say, though, I think I was thinking X factors. I didn't realize that OG Anunoby was going to be such a threat for this team. Like, he was not on front of mind as far as potential guys that could go off here. But nothing really shocked me about the way this game played out. It's just, I think the Celtics did a lot of things to hurt themselves, and New York played it just a tremendous second half. And I think they came and snatched that one.
Absolutely. New York definitely did and snatched that one. And, even with what the Celtics were doing poorly, like not hitting their threes, I know they missed 45 out of the 63s. Knicks had their flaws too yesterday. Obviously, we can look at like all the turnovers that they had. We could talk about the over aggression of Josh Hart in that first quarter, Karl-Anthony Towns being in foul trouble in the first half. We can even look at some of the boneheaded plays from even Jaylen Brunson in that fourth quarter where you're trying to close it out, and yet you're giving the Celtics many opportunities to get back in this thing and even win the game. But look, the Knicks did what they had to do yesterday. They came out there and it wasn't a perfect game, but they played aggressive and they stayed true to who they were, and they were able to get the job done. I think from a Knicks perspective, the biggest thing that shocked me was how well the perimeter defense played, because throughout the entire season, the Knicks
Yeah.
finished around 13th according to defensive rating, from that advanced stat according to NBA.com. And I just have not seen where Tibbs is more than willing to guard the perimeter and have guys just close out. Like, obviously, we know about closing out for, when they're in drop coverage and trying to hedge out and protect the paint. But these guys were just guarding the perimeter so well, even doing a little bit of stunting, doubling at times just to make sure that everyone was a little off edge. So that way they weren't getting clean looks from three. I thought that really impressed me from what the Knicks did. Is that something that you saw as well after watching these two teams compete through 4 games this regular season?
Yeah, they definitely, their defense was better than I expected. I mean, on paper, they have guys that should be able to be those perimeter defenders between Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, Josh Hart. Like, they have the personnel in theory. I think the thing the Celtics have been so good at this season is exploiting any bad defenders or any below average defenders on the floor. And they had trouble against Orlando because Orlando's whole defensive approach is that everybody on the floor defends at a high level. And so when I was watching Knicks Pistons, I was seeing Jalen Brunson, Karl-Anthony Towns pick and roll defense. And I was like, okay, I think Boston's just going to exploit this a crazy amount. And early on, you saw that a little bit. But I think that, like you said, the perimeter defense kind of changed in that second half and the pressure up. And the Celtics lost their poise. It's always hard to gauge how much of it is self-inflicted and how much is the other team. Al Horford today said they were the better team last night. Give them credit. Like he just flat out said that. But I also, having watched this team, night in and night out, they made some out of character mistakes down the stretch that I don't think were necessarily because of anything New York did. But where maybe they were just trying to close the game out, maybe they were trying to overcompensate for the fact that they couldn't hit anything. But they caused some damage to themselves as well.
For sure. I mean, look, it's all about who could play like the closest to the perfect game, right? And from a Celtics perspective, what did you see? I know everyone's pinpointing to missing all those threes, and we know the Celtics love to put up threes. Like they lead, they lead the league in the amount of attempts. It's just out of this world. I mean, I was with there with my boy. Shout out to John Maliga yesterday, watching this team, and they had like 12. It was like there was still time left to go in like the first quarter. I think it was like 5 minutes left or something along those lines, and there was like 12 threes already put up. I'm like, do they do anything else but put up threes? So for the Celtics, from a Celtics perspective, I know that's like the big talking point, and even being out here and hearing what the fans have to say, a lot of the threes were missed. But is there anything else that you saw from the Celtics that impacted their game yesterday?
Yeah, I mean, they also missed a lot of layups and a lot of like 2-point shots. Like that's the thing. They didn't shoot well from three, but they just didn't shoot well anywhere. You look at the Orlando series. Orlando did a really good job of limiting the 3-point attempts, and I think there was a question around the league of like, did they just show how you should guard Boston, and that's force them to drive, force them to take twos. And I always thought that was kind of a silly conversation because they actually handled the defense pretty well. I mean, they blew them out twice. They beat them in 5 games, and Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum routinely beat their defender and scored. And their drive rates are way up, their free throw rates are way up, and they were showcasing the fact that they're not just 3-point shooters. Ultimately, Tatum and Brown aren't great 3-point shooters. They're just a part of a system where you shoot a lot of threes, but it's not like that's the asset of their game. What I saw yesterday was the 3-point shot was so available early on that it was almost like they missed it so much. Like they finally had this shot that they love taking because this is a team that loves shooting threes. They didn't have it the entire first round. In game five, they attempted 6 threes in the first half of that game. They attempted 6 threes in the first 2 minutes of this game, it felt like, right? So I think just they almost overreacted to the Knicks defense. And then I think sometimes they just fall into that habit where they're taking medium good looks, but not great looks. And that's what I think you saw a lot of which down the stretch. But this is not a team that only shoots threes. I think their whole philosophy has been take the best shot available. They have like a killer whale offense where they kind of hunt whoever the weakest link is on the opposing team's defense. And I thought New York handled themselves really well, and the Celtics also just kind of resorted to a little bit of shot chucking down the stretch. And I would have loved to see like Tatum not take a contested three at the end of regulation when he's literally been missing all night. Brown finished 1 for 10. It was just nobody really had it going either, and that's always hard to overcome when you're pretty much your entire rotation is having a tough shooting night.
Do you think for do you think anything has changed? Like you still so do you still let me go back to this actually. So you still believe the Celtics are going to win this in five, even after the Knicks winning game one?
No, I don't think so. I mean, like I'm sticking with my prediction because it's like I already wrote it up and it's already up there. So like we'll see if I pan out. But if I could start, if that was over and I could start over, I would probably pick Celtics in 6 or 7 because winning game one, 75% of teams that win game one go on to win the series. I think a lot of the things that I really respect about this Knicks team, how they don't give up, how they have Jalen Brunson who's so clutch, Josh Hart's ability to crash and kind of impact the game in that way. Like all my favorite things about this team were on full display in this game, and we're kind of a reminder that the regular season is the regular season, but it doesn't necessarily translate into how playoff matchups go. So I still think Boston's going to win this series. The five is still in play. So I had a colleague that predicted a Celtics sweep. He's already out of the picture as far as having the correct prediction. So I still have a chance here. But I think after seeing that game, I'm going to give the Knicks a little bit more credit.
Okay, and is that colleague one Bobby Manning?
It is Bobby Manning. I think he was on here a couple days ago, right? So
He was, and I got to see Bobby. Shout out to Bobby; he does great work as well for CLNS, and got to meet up with him yesterday. And we were talking about at halftime, and he was actually impressed. He was like, "Oh, this." He's like, "You guys are actually in a good spot based on the way that New York came
and
out
that
and we
was when
kept
New
it
York was
close."
down by 16, right?
Was it down by six? Yeah, it was
Something
down
like
by
that.
16. Yeah, we were down by six. Yes, by the half. Yes, it was about that. And so like he was like, you guys are actually in a pretty good spot. You guys came out here and competed. Obviously, once again, Cat was in foul trouble. We had a lot. You had the hack and Mitch super early in that game, which I was very shocked about. But hey, with how New York even came out in the first quarter, it still set them up for a good finale. So I think for me, like I still predicted the Knicks to win this series in seven. It's going to be a slugfest. I think based on what New York had to experience against the Detroit Pistons and just getting ready for that physical style of play. And obviously they brought that question up to Jason Tatum last night in the presser saying, hey, uh, were the calls made? What do you think about like the lack of calls, this, that, and third? And Tatum, spoke about how it's just playoff basketball. You got to be ready for that type of physicality. The Knicks never had to really they never really embraced that physicality like last year's team. But I think after going through the Pistons,
Mm.
it's now been like, all right, we can actually play this type of physical brand of basketball. So why don't we actually implement what we learned first round into this one? So I think that's going to change things for how this series unfolds. So I like the Knicks' chances in this one, just based even on how yesterday's game panned out. I think they showed a lot of things that we'd even see during the regular season, and I think it's still something that can be was it? That can still be carried over game to game, and I don't think it's necessarily like a one game fluke as I hear like every day. It's like, or even not every day, but I heard a lot today saying, oh well, they gave the Celtics more credit for shooting themselves in the foot than the Knicks actually having to do what they had to do down the stretch. And like I said earlier, like there were moments where the Knicks were just handing the game over to the Celtics,
Yeah.
and so it's like they still had to go out there and do a job. You just don't fall into wins. That's not a thing. So I still give the Knicks a lot of credit for what they did today. So look, I'm
And
looking
I
forward.
think,
Go ahead.
yeah, and I was just gonna say, I think a lot of times that ends up just being the media narrative, especially national media. You focus more on the mistakes that a team made down the stretch and not on the team that actually went out and won this game. But I can just say a lot of teams, that type of game that the Celtics played yesterday where they're up by 20, they took their foot off the gas, they had some defensive lapses late game. Usually they still win that game. And last year's playoff run, the teams that they matched up against, they played the Pacers. They had a lot of weird games where they were battling down the stretch, and those, the Pacers were not able to make enough plays to come away with the win. I think the difference in this one is that New York was able to. So I give the Knicks credit. I think Al Horford said it, but I would agree with him that it was more about what New York was able to do in this one rather than just Celtics collapse. And game two is probably going to be the indicator of kind of which direction the series is heading is what I would think.
Salute to Knicks Nation. Thank you all for tuning for another game of the week preview. We're previewing game two of this matchup between the Knicks and Celtics. They play tomorrow night back at TD Garden. All right. And with me on the other side is none other than Noah Dalzell. She covers the Celtics for Celtics CLNS and Celtics blog. Also, forgot to mention earlier, you can go find her as the host of her own show. You Got Boston podcast over on YouTube. So make sure to go check that out. Make sure to hit that thumbs up button for your squad. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Let's keep it rolling. So, what's the feeling amongst the Celtics right now as a whole, since you cover this team on the beat?
Yeah, so I would say today we heard from Derek White and Al Horford, and there are two guys that are pretty soft spoken. They're not going to say anything super inflammatory, but the reality is this is a veteran Celtics team filled with players that have trailed in series before, that have been in the finals, that are almost always in the conference finals, with the exception of one season over the past seven, six. So they're not, I don't think there's a level of panic because they lost game one. I think it's the kind of game that if it happens in game two, three, or four, it feels different, but because it happened right off the top, now you're in a deficit, which they haven't been in since 2023. So Joe said something today, but like we're not going to start changing like everything that we do because we lost a playoff overtime game because like just because it sucks. You're a lot of what they did in this game I think did work. There's a reason why they were up by 20 at a point, right? Like every time we talk about a team blowing a lead, there's also the conversation around how it built that lead, right? And all the things that did work to an extent. So I sensed a lot of calm. I don't think there's going to be much panic. I think the film session was a little bit brutal. When I rewatched this game, the thing that stood out to me most was not the 3-point shots, but it was the defensive lapses down the stretch were pretty out of character. And Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum were two of the guys most responsible for those. And so I don't forecast that would happen multiple games in a row. But from the beginning, and I'll say this, and I'm sure if there are Celtics fans here, they don't want to hear this, but I felt like the level of like cockiness around the series from the Boston side reminded me a little bit of the 2023 Miami series in the conference
Mm.
finals. And there are things about those two teams that kind of remind me of each other. They both have a winning player at the center, Jimmy Butler and Jalen Brunson, and they both have role players that kind of came together for a postseason run. And I don't, it's one game, and I don't necessarily think that New York's going to do what Miami did in that round. But anytime I start looking at the betting odds and everybody's picking, Celtics in 5, which is what I picked, so I'm not going to act like I was above it. But it starts giving you this feeling of like, at the end of the day, this was the team with the fifth best record in the NBA this season, New York, right? And they do have two All NBA players and some elite role players that they paid a hefty price to acquire. So there's no reason to think this is not going to be a really competitive round. And so it could go either direction. I could see Boston winning tomorrow, winning handily and kind of taking care of business and then winning, 3 or 4 games in a row. If they lose tomorrow, everybody's going to have the 2023 Miami flashbacks. It's just inevitable to win game one, have home court advantage, have the odds be so in your favor and kind of just unravel in a win where a season after a season that you were expected to be a championship contender. I think everybody's wondering which way this is going to head. And I think we'll know in about 24 hours here.
You certainly will. And I could tell you there was a lot of tension as I was marching down, taking the orange line, getting to TD Garden yesterday. I could feel the tension on the tee. And then there was a lot you talk about confidence. I said it yesterday. I felt like there was a lot of air, like people who were talking to me yesterday, like, so why are Knicks fans traveling all the way up from New York to come watch this team lose? There's a lot of arrogance. And I'm like, all right, man, like settle down. There is a game to be had. There's a series to be had. Let's not just write us off just yet. And look, very happy at how it ended yesterday. A lot of Knicks fans were out in the streets just cheering and jumping for joy. I was one of them. But obviously now it comes to the next battle, game two. And so while the Celtics are feeling high, I know the Knicks are, they're trying to keep their poise. There's another, you got to take it game by game, and they're looking at the next game. Like, how do we get ready for the next game? Get ready for the punches that Boston's going to throw at us. So let's talk about the setup for this one. Actually, better yet, I know Kristaps Porzingis, and I feel like he's actually going to be a big question mark for tomorrow. And I saw that he was probable for tomorrow. How crucial is he for this series?
So in theory, I think they should be fine without him. But he gives them another layer of versatility defensively. He obviously is a guy that averaged 19.5 points per game for them this season. He was their third leading scorer and can go for 30 on any given night, as New York fans saw in the fourth time that the teams matched up in April. They won a championship pretty much without him last year. Like, he only appeared in 5 games or 6 games that entire run. But it just makes your margin of error that much smaller because now Al Horford is playing 40 minutes a night. Luke Cornett now has to come in and give you 20 minutes, especially against this team. I think they like the double big look, and you lose out a lot of like flexibility in the lineups that they run and in the combinations and all that. I will say, if he plays like how he's been playing in this playoff run, he's kind of a non-factor. If anything, they've struggled with him on the floor offensively because he has just been in such a massive slump. Through this first round, averaged 12 points per game on 35% shooting. This is a guy who mostly shoots around the basket, right? And was shooting 49% from the season, from the field during the season. So a massive decline. Everybody was like, maybe it was just Orlando and their physicality. Then he comes out yesterday and misses his first 4 shots and couldn't even hit a layup. Like, he looked so out of whack. And I was thinking to myself, he must just be in his head. He must just be in a massive slump here. Like, it happens. It's basketball. We all know that that's mental is such a big part of the game. And then now we heard today that he's apparently been dealing with this illness and fighting through it and working through it since he's come back. He came back from it in mid-March. And so I'm wondering now, like, is that part of what was going on in Orlando? If he comes back tomorrow, but he doesn't have a motor, like, what does that mean? So a healthy, full, at his best, Kristaps Porzingis is an absolute swing factor in the series and could be one of the best players on the floor at any given night. But that's not the guy we've been seeing over these past few weeks. So I just don't know what to expect here from him.
Yeah, and I had him as I had him and Cat as my key matchup for this series, just because I feel like both of them could swing. Now, Cat obviously didn't have a great game yesterday. He was still impactful on the boards, had some moments, especially that putback late in the game over, I think it was Jaylen Brown, just to make sure that, added on to the phenomenal shot that Mikal Bridges had from the corner. And so I say that with both these guys, like the Knicks got Karl-Anthony Towns to match KP in the sense of we want stretch bigs. We want to make sure we get a full 5-out system, open up the lanes for guys like Brunson, OG, Josh Hart, guys who like to get downhill, even cut. Same thing for Bridges too. Like, these are guys that can easily cut the lanes if there's a lot of space and finish around the rim if there's space to be had. And so that's why I think for both of them, both necessary guys for both each team. And it's just such a swing factor with both of them on the court because Towns not a great defender. And if you're going to have KP guarding Towns, like, Towns can still score. KP can still shoot the 3. Like, Towns is not the greatest defender, as I already said. It's like, how does that all play out? And so that's why I was looking at this matchup. But if you're not going to have KP, then I feel like this game still changes to the side of like the Knicks then, because now you're talking about Al Horford being that stretch five, and we see that the Knicks are just willing. They just are looking for that switch to get him on Brunson, and Brunson to go to work on Horford.
Yeah, and teams do that all year. They hunt Horford. Donovan Mitchell was doing it in the playoffs last year. Pretty much any given night. I think against the Lakers, they said there was some record set that Al Horford was hunted more than any player in an NBA game ever. Um, I think the Celtics would live with that because he's gonna have his moments. Brunson's gonna hit. He had a few big shots over Horford yesterday, but ultimately, like over the course of a series, he actually holds his own quite well defensively. He always surprises teams, and I think the numbers kind of back that up as well. So they'll live with that, but I think you're losing an offensive punch that you have with KP, and then not to mention the fact that I think right now they're living with I thought they would actually live with it a little bit more during the season. I felt like they were okay with Karl-Anthony Towns post ups. They were doubling him a little bit yesterday, which kind of surprised me because I think usually that's the kind of thing that they would allow. But yeah, I think it's just you're now relying on Luke Cornett too, who's a guy who's not a proven playoff performer at all, who was great for Boston this season, but now you're relying on him to come in and play serious minutes and potentially match up with Karl-Anthony Towns too, and kind of figure all that out. So it just puts them in a tougher spot, and I think Sam Hauser's probably going to miss a few games here, if not the series, because he looked like he was in pretty severe pain with his ankle sprain yesterday. Was kind of hobbling out of the locker room. So now you're down two of your rotation players, and they usually play. They have 9 guys that I think they feel comfortable playing in this playoff run, and now you're down to 7 potentially. So there's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot at stake here. But I hate when they force the issue with Porzingis and they force him to kind of exploit the mismatch and he doesn't have it going and it stalls the offense. And so in the first round, I felt like sometimes when he was out there, it was actually hurting them more than it was helping.
Mm.
And if knowing now maybe it's a motor thing or an illness, or like maybe that's part of it, but I felt like they looked great in that early part of the third quarter without him, and then obviously they blow that lead, and then it becomes more of a conversation around like maybe it would have helped if he was out there.
And now you talk about being down essentially to 7 players. That's where it really works for the Knicks' favor because we play essentially 7 players between McBride and Mitchell Robinson coming off the
Yeah.
bench. So now for a team where, or I should say an opponent where, we look at them as like, oh, depth is going to be an issue for this team. Our guys play a lot of minutes. You guys, Celtics get to, throw in a lot of different players, have fresh legs out there, continue to compete. How are the Knicks able to maintain or just compete with that? And so if it's going to be dwindled down to 7, then once again, I'm thinking that this goes into the Knicks' favors. And another guy I got to talk about is Jaylen Brown because, he played okay yesterday, not necessarily to the standard that I think many are used to him watching him perform at. What's the status on Jaylen Brown? Because I know there's issues with his knee. I know that he's out
Yeah.
there playing, but doesn't look like the same guy.
No, definitely not. So to your point about the depth, I think it comes into play more right now because a lot of players in the starting lineup are banged up. Tatum has this wrist thing that I'm not sure exactly how much is bothering him. He said it was serious at one point during the Orlando series. Drew Holiday just came back from a 3-game absence. He said he felt good, but he's going to monitor how it responds. So hopefully he's good to go tomorrow with no issues. But Jaylen Brown has been the story for Boston since mid-February when he started dealing with this right knee bone bruise that for some reason, he didn't take significant time to rest. It's unclear exactly why he played through it. I think a lot of people critiqued that decision. I always felt like I kind of just trust what he felt was right for his body, and he had a plan, and he got some injections before the postseason began. Had a good first round for the most part against Orlando. Had some moments where he looked like he clearly was on himself, but he doesn't have that explosion that he normally has. I thought yesterday he had no lift on his shot at all. And I don't know if that's because of the knee or because he was just short on everything, but he really was from the beginning to the end of that game. And I thought defensively, he made a lot of mistakes that were very costly for this team. And I don't know if that's a focus thing or something else, but he was a shell of his best self in yesterday's game. And he's a pretty proven playoff player for this team. Obviously, he was Eastern Conference Finals MVP last year. So he has the accolades, he has the experience. He's won 17 playoff series. If you just think about how much that is for a guy, still in his prime. And it just puts, the whole thing going into the playoffs was if Brown's going to be limited, they're going to need Porzingis to kind of become that second scorer. And instead, we've seen Porzingis kind of revert into a previous version of him on a different team, not the Celtics Porzingis that we know. And Brown yesterday looked to be pretty limited in a number of ways. So then it kind of goes to, can Tatum be your hero? And down the stretch in Orlando, he was. He had some massive, massive performances in games 3, 4, and 5. And yesterday, he just did not have it. So it's all about, what's your margin of victory, of error here, how many things can go wrong. And right now, a number of things are going wrong for the Celtics at the same time, which I think are opening the door for New York.
Yeah, and I think when I'm watching, I'm watching. This is just all why I'm bringing all this up because once again, it comes all into the favor of the Knicks, right? Where
Right.
if you talk about injuries, you talk about guys not playing to their, full health, and look, you got to play who's in front of you. If you're available, you got to play as well. But Knicks are, I'm liking. This is why I continue to like the Knicks' chances and how long they can extend this series and what they're able to accomplish this round. Salute to Knicks Nation. Thank you all for tuning in for another game of the week preview. We are getting ready for game 2 tomorrow. Okay, so make sure to hit that thumbs up button for the squad. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Make sure to support our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Use that promo code KFTV to get up to $1,000 in instant bonus cash and a free pick. People, let me tell you what I love Underdog Fantasy. Look, I like to think that I know more than what Underdog's trying to tell me. And so when I'm watching sports, I like to put a little money down and see if I can win something in return. So as I'm watching the NBA, especially if you're watching a crazy game like the Pacers and Cavs tonight, where you see Halliburton hit that crazy three, this is where you're like, if you had a feeling that the Pacers were going to do something special, maybe put a little money down and see what you can win. So this is how you play Underdog Fantasy, right? There's two options. You got the daily fantasy drafts, and you can go create a ticket. If you're creating a ticket, all you got to do is just choose anywhere between 2 to 8 players and choose higher or lower on any stats. So let's say you were watching, well, let's go for tomorrow. Let's say you got Jaylen Brunson for higher than 25.5 points. I'm going to choose higher. All right. Some people may choose lower because you don't believe. Maybe you're Celtics fans. You don't want to see that happen, but I'm going to say higher than 25.5 points. I believe Jaylen Brunson could do that tomorrow. And so all you got to do is just make sure that all your selections match up and then you get to win some money. And the cool thing is you can either go big or go home with making sure all your picks go right, or you can go with the insured route where all you need to do is just get, say, 3 out of 4, 5 out of 6, and then you can still earn some money in return. Now, if you don't want to create a ticket, the other thing you can do is go put on your GM cap and see if you're better than a bunch of Randalls or maybe your friends and go earn some of that lunch money or beer money, whatever it may be, okay? So make sure to support our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Use that promo code KFTV to get up to $1,000 in instant bonus cash and a free pick. All right, now let's get ready to wrap this thing up. What are the adjustments are we expecting for game 2? Okay, I'll let you start off for the Celtics.
I don't think you're going to see anything drastic. I think they're just going to have to come out a little bit sharper than they did yesterday. I thought they weren't really sharp. Even early on, the Knicks just missed some threes, but defensively, I think you're going to see probably a different level of intensity and focus because that was what was most apparent when I rewatched this game. And they're probably going to hit more than 15 of 63s. So those are the areas where I think they're going to improve a little bit. Joe said, I asked him today about the defense, and he said they just didn't follow personnel tendencies very well. Like, it's like the fouling Jaylen Brunson, Jaylen Brown did late in the game. There's the OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges. Like they kind of just weren't treating those guys the way they should, considering exactly what their scouting report probably says. So I don't think you're going to see anything dramatically different. I do expect Jaylen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns to potentially have even bigger games, and so you have to kind of account for that because that was always the question of, right? Are those guys going to kill you, or is it going to be the other guys? And I think in game 1 it was the other guys, and you just don't know what's going to happen in game 2. But I don't think you're going to see anything majorly different. I don't know, on the Knicks side, do you see anything that you expect to be substantially different?
I don't see anything substantially different happening for the Knicks either. I think if anything, maybe they say tone it down, especially like Josh Hart with the aggression that he had in the first quarter. I think it's more of like the mentality of getting ready for this game more than it is of the X's and O's because I still think they're going to go out there and, what they already implemented yesterday is going to work. That's what they got to believe, right? What we did yesterday should work for game 2. So I don't expect them to do anything like that. But I think mentally, how do you stay sharp? How do you stay prepared for what Boston's about to throw at you? I think that's what they're going to be looking out for. And, a lot of the stuff that worked yesterday for Boston was, especially in the late was just how the Boston's are able to move the rock around so quickly and effectively and finding cutters like Drew Holiday getting that layup on Karl-Anthony Towns while he's right there in the dunker spot. I think there's going to be a conversation about that saying, all right, how do we position ourselves? How do we get ready for these backdoor cuts? I think that's something from a defensive standpoint that they're going to be discussing for tomorrow's game because if Boston's not knocking down the three, the one thing that they certainly do well is just sharing the basketball. And so if that's gonna happen and they're knocking down their threes, then it's gonna be a high level of attention to detail from a defensive standpoint. Now, offensively, they got out there and ran yesterday, and I think that more than passing the rock itself, Like a lot of the passing that they were doing, like sharing the rock for the Knicks, was just it kind of felt like it was just out of necessity. Like, oh, the isolation wasn't there, so
For New
what are we gonna
York.
get? Yeah, for New York. I felt
That's
like
how I always feel watching the Knicks. I don't know if like this is no hate. I told you I'm a big fan of a lot of these guys, but Jalen Brunson, like I always feel like he passes when he rarely doesn't have a potential way to score, but sometimes it feels like he passes a little bit of a last resort. Is that accurate to say, or is that slandering the franchise player?
You're not slandering the franchise player. I mean, look, the Knicks ended the game yesterday with 19 assists, and he can certainly pass the ball very well. I think
Right.
the thing that has, that stopped the Knicks from seeing that high level of like assists because beginning of the season they were getting like 30, 36 assists per game. It was historic under a Tom Thibodeau led team. They usually don't lead in assists with Tibbs as a head coach. And so uh it was working well because that Brunson cat pick and roll was working. So now you had to account for those guys. Like who's going to score? Is Cat going to pop? Is he going to roll to the basket? What's Brunson going to decide to do? Cat works really well out of the short roll. Brunson can work the pocket passes very well, but because that they've been using wings to stop Towns from getting to his positioning and just making him think twice of does he want to shoot from the three? Does he want to drive? Does he want to does he want to like roll down the lane? It's impacted Brunson's ability to get, you know, effective passes in the half court. And they don't really run like multiple actions within a set where it's like, okay, if that doesn't work, who's the next guy coming through and we'll find this
Mm.
guy. Like we saw with the Sacramento Kings, obviously what the Indiana Pacers love to do. And so that's just not what this offense is. And so because a lot of it relies on, all right, it's this possession, it's going to be Brunson. Oh, it's not, it's this position, it's going to be Karl Anthony Towns. So it's our two best scorers. It just feels like a lot of just as we've been discussing, like, oh, well, there's nothing that's working, so let's just move the rock and find it. And so they're gonna have to really play at a better level tomorrow because I know the Celtics are to come out with their A game and trying to share the rock. And so Knicks, while I love seeing them get out in transition, makes the game much more easier for them. Get some easy baskets. They're really going to have to hunker down and not just try to rely on this isolation game. And then, oh, look, OG's just open in the quarter and do a lot of this. I know it's a very read and react system that Tibbs implements, but it's got to be a little bit more high level than that, especially with what the Celtics like to run. And look, Celtics defensively, especially if KP's out there, that's five guys that can play defense, five guys that can do some playmaking, five guys that can score. And so it's a little bit more difficult for a Knicks team where, I would say there's a few more flaws than what the Celtics have, especially between the starting five. And so I think the execution level has to be just a little bit higher from a Knicks standpoint offensively. Defensively, it's just trying to stop the cutting. Yeah, I don't know. I'm really curious to see what game two looks like. I'm really curious to see the aggression from both of these teams and how they're prepped for tomorrow's game.
Yeah, it's going to be a huge one. We just saw this Cleveland Pacers game. I think it perfectly foreshadows what's at stake here with this game. This feels like a massive swing game. I think if New York wins tomorrow, they'd be favored to win the series for sure. Taking two games on the road and then coming back to Madison Square Garden with more momentum than I don't know when the last time a Knicks team had this much momentum in that case. And I think if Boston takes care of business, you look at game one as a little bit more of an aberration. So it's a
Hmm.
massive game. I'm sure it'll be a good one. I would imagine that no one's going to blow out the other team because I think they're both going to come in with a level of urgency. I saw on the Knicks side, I don't think they were celebrating. I don't think that they were thinking to themselves. They figured out how to beat Boston because they ultimately know they got a lot of clean looks too that are probably going to drop. But I also think New York didn't play their best game. So there's reason for why both sides can look at game one and say, we weren't nearly our best selves, and obviously one team wins. But I'm looking forward to this game. I think it'll be a good one.
Last question before I let you get out of here, Noah. Who is the player tomorrow that you believe needs to step up to change things for the Celtics?
A little bit of a cop out, but Jason Tatum, because ultimately he's their MVP. He's the guy that's kind of been carrying them all season. He's had, I think, the best season of his career, not his best shooting season, but overall. And he was their guy in the first round that kind of covered up some mistakes that others were making. So, in this game, he was not himself after starting 4 of 8 from the field. I forget the exact numbers, but he barely made any shots the rest of the way. And so I think you're gonna see him have to come up with a big game here. He is ultimately like they go as he and Brown goes. I think it's both of those guys, but right now I have more faith in Tatum's ability to kind of take over a game just because I do think Brown is still limited. But really, it's those two guys that have they're never going to win games if they play the way they did in game one.
Okay, I'm gonna go with Karl Anthony Towns for myself because he didn't necessarily have the greatest game. Offensively, you're gonna need more of a punch from him, and we saw him get it going in that end of the first quarter, beginning of the second quarter. I can't remember exactly, but especially when they put Brown on him in the post, and you talk about them doubling Cat, and he's just working that baseline and just getting some shots. If he wasn't in foul trouble. We see a little bit
Yeah.
more. Maybe it's a different game the way they close out. And I mean, you put Mitchell Robinson out there. Hack and Mitch, they slow the game down. At one point, they for a glimpse, they were going a little small. I'm like, okay. Then they bring Precious in. I'm like, okay. Now we're going to the Precious side of things, and it was actually a little refreshing to see. All right, we're actually using our bench this time to match what the Celtics are doing. So I'm going with Karl Anthony Towns. We're going to need a big offensive performance from him tomorrow, just so that we don't see this same all right, now we got to work our way from a 20-point deficit again. I feel like because of him being in foul trouble going to that third quarter, and then just we just can't have that. We just cannot have that from a Knicks standpoint. No, appreciate you coming through as always. Please let the listeners know where they can find you if you got any work up and coming we should be on the lookout for.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Always a good time. You can check out my podcast, You Got Boston podcast on YouTube. I do a post-game pod after every game and after every practice as well right now in the postseason. And all of my other rest of my video content all on CLNS Media. So if we have a post-game show, you can come in there as a Knicks fan and tell us why you guys are great. After game two, we had some Knicks fans after game one. It's always a good time. So appreciate you having me. Good to have the conversation. I look forward to tomorrow's game. I haven't been this anticipating of a playoff game in a while.
Let's go. Shout out to Noah Dalzell once again for coming through. Make sure to hit that thumbs up button for the squad. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Make sure to give Noah a follow on all socials. He does a great job covering the Celtics and also does a great job covering the WNBA. So make sure to give her a follow if you love the WNBA as well. And people, remember, support our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Use that promo code KFTV to get up to $1,000 in instant bonus cash and a free pick. And don't forget, we got a watch party tomorrow at the Ainsworth, all right, in Manhattan, starting at 5 p.m. sharp. Get over there. We got DJ Eric L. Beats on the ones and twos as always. CP will be there. We know the Knicks chick will be there. Everyone needs to be in there supporting Knicks Nation, okay? Supporting the New York Knicks as they're on the road in Beantown taking on the Celtics. We already know how big of a mountain this is, the task that is at hand. So make sure to go to the Ainsworth, join your fellow Knicks Nation family members, and make sure to go support the orange and blue, as we already know, okay? Make sure to get 5 p.m. sharp, all right? Don't show up late. Get ready. Get there. Get correct. Go get your drink swag on. You already know what it is. And don't forget, we also got a newsletter. Make sure to subscribe to the newsletter. You get great articles from our crew. We also give you all the details on our merch, all the sponsors, okay? So make sure to go over to the newsletter, go subscribe to it. That way you get all the updates. And look, if anything ever happens to the channel, it's going to be there. The news will be there. What's happened to it, okay? So make sure to subscribe to the newsletter if you haven't already done so. And look, you already know what's going to happen tomorrow. We're going to have play-by-play. We're going to have post-game. So make sure to stay tapped in. Noah, thanks again for joining us. All right, Knicks Nation, salute to all you. And I saw that we got Pats Nation with a $2 super chat. Shout out to Pats Nation. Of course, we get a Celtics fan in here, asking some crazy questions of if we're going to sign Jeremy Lin. No, that's not going to happen. Please. We're going to stick with the crew that we got. But salute to everybody. Salute to all the franchise channel members as well. Shout out to my chief mod and operation TM. Shout out to Kyle Dason. Shout out to you. Shout out to who else we got in here? Ooh, KG7 Fool. We got Andrew H. Shout out to Andrew H. We got G5 Weez in here too. Shout out to you. P McG. Shout out to you as well. Zach in LA always in here getting ready. All right, man. Salute to all you. We'll catch you tomorrow. We out.